Good morning, everyone. I still have 5 more minutes to say that. I was getting a little bit worried as I was standing up here that I'd be irrelevant almost immediately. Um, okay, so I was asked to give you guys a little bit of an update on the OER project at Hudson and just kind of I'm always a little bit stressed when I have to do something like this at College Service Day because I'm like, there's definitely people out there who don't know what OER is, and therefore I have to kind of repeat myself, even though a lot of you have already been to a lot of my presentations. And how do I make it for everyone? So I do have a slide or two just kind of with a brief explanation of what OER is for those of you who are new to this. And then I'll get into a little bit of some of the data we found from our survey this spring and there where we intend to go with this project going forward. So next slide, please. I thought I'd start us off with a meme. So I discovered this meme on the interweb, as one does, and I thought it was quite humorous. For those of you who can't see it, it is a television, and somebody has put 4 or 5, maybe a little bit more textbooks underneath it, and said, check out my $1,000 TV stand. So for me, there's actually two jokes going on here. One is something I think we're all familiar with, that textbooks are extraordinarily expensive. Um, Only a few of them can lead up to a high price like this, $1,000. Now, for our students, $1,000 is an extraordinary amount of money. For most of us, it is, right? And this is something that students tend to be burdened with. But there's a second joke in here that it took me a little bit of time to realize. And that is something that has happened to many of my textbooks as well, which is once the semester is over, they kind of become $1,000 paperweight that you have here. Now, I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I did like to keep some of my textbooks and read them occasionally, but not everyone is inclined to that, and of course, it depends on your subject matter. Um, but they do quickly go out of print and therefore are irrelevant to you in the future semester. In fact, if you even try to sell it back to the bookstore, unfortunately, what happens? Oh yeah, well, we'll take that $200 textbook back, but we'll give you $20, something like that. And it becomes irrelevant and it stays in your dorm room or house. Next slide, please. So what are open educational resources? Open educational resources are textbooks and other materials that are provided at no cost to the student. So I'll emphasize that, no cost to the student. There are sometimes inbuilt costs to the university, but I'll get into that in a minute. They are available under what's called an open license. So many of these materials are created by our colleagues around the country, around the globe, and what our colleagues have done is allowed these materials that they've created, textbooks that they've written, articles that they've written, to be what's called openly licensed, that they've allowed these materials to be freely accessible to everyone, freely used by everyone, and able to be built upon and changed by anyone. Next slide, or next. Anyone is free to adapt, adopt, or use these materials. What this does is it gives faculty a tremendous amount of flexibility with the materials that they're using. As a person who's in the classroom, as many of you are, you might recognize getting to a chapter in the textbook and saying to yourself, why am I teaching this chapter? I don't like it, doesn't make sense. I know it's kind of in there, I've always done it this way, and I don't know what to do. What open educational resources allow is not just the ability to maybe skip that chapter or to add a different chapter in there, but perhaps even go back to your pedagogy and say, why are we teaching that chapter to begin with if it's not something that's relevant to my students? Next. One thing that OER allows is it can be combined with other materials that I think we use on a day-to-day basis, which are what we would call free materials. Free materials, not to be confused with OER materials, are materials that we often provide for our students that are free at the point of access for our students. So for example, newspaper articles in a free newspaper that we might provide the link for. YouTube videos, podcasts, things that we use in our classroom that are free, but are technically not openly licensed, so therefore they're not OER. But what we can do is we can take OER materials, we can combine them with these free materials, to create what we call textbook-free courses at Hudson. So our definition here is an OER course at Hudson County Community College is a course wherein students will not have to purchase a textbook, hence the textbook free. OER courses can be created by faculty using exclusively licensed OER materials, those free OER materials that I mentioned earlier, or in a combination with other free materials that are available at the point of access for students. Another free at the point of access material for students that I forgot to mention, which I'm remembering now, is some of the abundant resources of our library, which tend to be underused. Our library subscribes to many databases, many academic journals, and we can use those. Our students have access to them. And many don't know that, many of our faculty don't know that. And here we have top scholars at the top of their field, relevant information that we can be sharing with our students, that our students do not have to purchase. Okay, so what are some of the benefits of using OER? So the number one benefit, which I think is most obvious, is that it reduces students' educational costs. Our guest speaker this morning spoke a lot about removing some of the barriers that our students face, particularly financial barriers. One of the financial barriers that our students face is textbook costs. Many of us went to college ourselves and love our textbooks, or we love our field. And I think sometimes we get a little bit wedded to that. But for many of our students, it is a hindrance and a barrier for them. So removing this barrier can increase positive results. Additionally, it encourages collaboration amongst faculty, staff, librarians, the Center for Online Learning, who you just heard from, and students themselves. When you try to remove the textbook from your class, you may discover, as I hinted at earlier, why am I teaching this particular chapter if I don't like it or if it's something that's irrelevant now? What do my students want to learn about? Particularly with free materials, I know many of you do this, but I do it myself, where I might find an article in this morning's newspaper that I found particularly relevant or particularly interesting that I can then sub into something that I was teaching that day and provide it for my students right away. It contributes to sharing of content, best practices, consistently updating the materials that we're using. It raises the standards of educational resources by attracting more contributors. The more outside voices you're getting, the better, as opposed to a textbook, which is the single voice of a particular person, maybe a group. It allows for peer review. So one question I often get about open educational resources is, how do we know that it's peer reviewed? Well, many OER resources are peer reviewed, and they'll usually say it. Others, maybe not so much. But what they allow for is they allow for this open collaboration, where not only are some of them peer reviewed, but because they're openly licensed, because they are out there on the interweb, many different colleagues from around the country can come together to collate these resources or to add to them. Many of the OER textbooks that I use or have found are collaborative projects around the globe, where faculty members across institutions are adding to them and changing them. And it contributes to free and open learning throughout the world, which again, removing those barriers to our students' education. Next. Okay, so I wanted to share with you, every semester we try to run a survey of the textbook-free courses that we've done at Hudson so far. And I tried to just grab a few highlights here, so it's not a complete results of the survey, but things that I found interesting. So in our survey of students, 80% of students surveyed felt that textbook-free materials contributed to their academic success by meeting personal learning needs and interests. Most notably, video and audio content ranked the highest for materials that help with learning. So we asked students, what kind of content do you like? Do you like video, audio, text, things like that? Video and audio were by far the two biggest ones. 63% of our students accessed their materials, and this surprised me, with either a personal computer or an HCCC computer. I thought that maybe phones or tablets would be higher. They were about 27%, but I was surprised that 63% were still using a computer. And of course, if you can do the math there is a small percentage of students who still like to print out their works. And I'm kind of a print person myself, despite being an OER advocate. I do like to have the physical in front of me to, highlight and things like that. So that brings us to a question, if you're new to OER, that you may have. How do I develop an OER or textbook-free course here at Hudson? So my first advice to you is to speak with your coordinator and division dean. Coordinators and division deans are the ones who decide what materials you can use, and it's good to get their permission or work in collaboration with them before you start changing things up on your own. However, if you're interested in using these type of materials, I do encourage you to speak with them and see what they have already. Many of our coordinators and deans have already developed some of these materials or are using them for other courses and can share with you what they've been using. I also ask you to create an account on a website called oercommons.org. Now, oercommons.org is one of many OER repository websites, but I find it the easiest to use and the one that's kind of the most, I guess, ubiquitous. On oercommons.org, I've created a Hudson group, so you can find that, Hudson County Community College OER group. And what I've done there is I've created folders for a variety of different classes that we have that we've worked developing OER for. And if your course is not on there, we can create new folders. In fact, if you sign up, it's a free sign up for that website. You can create your own folder there. And then what you can do is, as you're searching that website, as you're searching other OER websites, you can find material, add it to that website, and then add it to your folder so that you have a nice repository of all the materials that you'd like to use for your course. So that this way, as you change your course each semester, you don't have to reinvent the wheel and go find everything new. You have a whole repository of things that you can use. You also will then meet with an assigned librarian or IT/COL person if they are available. It depends on what you're trying to do, okay? To get some more materials. Now, our librarians are all trained in OER, and they are excellent at finding materials. So if you're having trouble, you can always speak with one of them, and they will be able to point you in the right direction. They're also experts on copyright, so if you're worried about any copyright infringement or what can I use for my OER course, they can put you in that right direction as well. Next. Then we would ask you, once you have created this course, to present the course to the OER steering committee, which we can then approve it. And with everyone's blessing, we can then roll it out to our students so that our students can benefit from not having to purchase a textbook for this course. Okay. So where do we go from here? So what we're doing is we're looking to expand our program into other areas and disciplines. That's kind of one of those ongoing goals that every semester I'll come up here and say that. We're always looking into new areas, new disciplines. So if you're in an area or discipline that hasn't used a lot of OER resources yet, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you about that, and we can see how we can go forward finding those materials. Additionally, we're always looking for new grants and collaborations with our fellow institutions. As I find out more grants, more information, I'll of course reach out to interested parties or relevant parties, but we will also post some of those grants and things like that on our LibGuide, which I can give you the address for. It's not up there, but I'll send it out to you guys. And I'd also wanted to mention the Middlesex Open Textbook Collaborative Project, which was a grant which Middlesex Community College is the lead on, but it is in consortium with Hudson and many other New Jersey community colleges. That largely focuses on STEM courses, but if you are interested in that, I can give you more information. The first round was this spring. There will be another round next spring as well to develop courses, and of course it is compensated through the grant, and you can work in collaboration with some of the other partner institutions in New Jersey. We are also asking any deans or coordinators to do the following: reach out to your coordinators or faculty, depending if you're the dean or not, and reach out to the OER steering committee to kind of get us all together if you're interested in going in this direction, which I do encourage. Encourage your coordinators to adopt OER and to pursue textbook-free courses. Faculty who do create these courses or who are involved in their creation will receive compensation. And then you can tell I've used an old slide here and just tried to update it, but I've missed one key thing, is encourage faculty to attend the workshop not on December 3rd, but the workshop that is on October 7th that I'll be giving on OER and open pedagogy, which is a further aspect of OER. I'd also encourage any faculty who are interested to attend. There's numerous OER workshops, including one called Open Ed, which is a nationwide workshop. It is virtual this year. It's in late October. I was lucky enough to attend that in, I believe it was 2016. I was Googling it before because the keynote speaker at Open Ed 2016 was Sarah Goldrick-Robb. So I was able to see her there as well. And just interesting to hear what other institutions around the country and around the globe are doing with OER. Okay, thank you very much. Last slide, which is my info, mwelpley@hccc.edu, and that is my phone number for my office, 4383 extension. So if you have any interest or any questions about OER and going forward, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Michael, we have one question here.
All right, I think I'm right.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Michael. And yeah, I would definitely add to that. And that's somewhere we would like to go in the future, is to create more databases, rather through Canvas or maybe other software that we can purchase, to have places where faculty and students can deposit any sort of materials that they find, and therefore grow our kind of collection, and just have more access. More access is usually one of those great things. Yes. Yep. 100%. Yes, thank you. I try to use lots of videos and even audio in my courses. And you don't always have to use it as kind of the main purveyor of knowledge. You can use it as kind of a supplement. Also check out this podcast I was listening to on this exact topic if you're interested in that. Or here's this 10-minute video to lead a class discussion. And there's so much that you can do with those types of materials. Thank you. Again. So it really depends. If you're using true OER materials, they are openly licensed, which means that the copyright is that you're allowed to use it however you'd like. And sometimes what that means is changing the materials that are there, which is kind of weird to do. I think, a lot of us, when we read a book, we're like, okay, that's what that person wrote. And, I might have my own opinions on it. But what you can do with openly licensed materials is you can take someone's work, add extra paragraphs that are yours, and then republish it as your own thing, as long as you're giving credit in the proper manner. But that's kind of the beauty of OER. With free materials, it gets a little bit trickier because those are obviously copyrighted things. So you can always speak with the librarians if you're concerned about that. They know a little bit more about copyright than I do. But as long as it's for educational purposes and as long as it's, through Canvas or through our classroom, you're usually okay with sharing some of those things, as long as it's not like entire books usually. But it really depends on the material that's being used. So you can always speak with someone, myself or the library, if you have questions about a particular piece of material.
All right, thank you so much. Any additional questions? Please email Michael, and he, as you can see, so enthusiastically want to help us. We need to move along in the program. We have